Afternoon. We have a tight program today, so if you could please take your seats. Okay, hi, my name is Margaret Mueller. I'm the president and the CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to our very first program of this season. The summer has been an exciting time of lining up some fantastic speakers. We're honored to kick off today as we host Dara Khosrowshahi, the CEO of Uber. As you know, Dara is in town making some really exciting announcements. If you haven't heard them yet, you will in just a moment. And we are thrilled that amidst all of his media stops, he is sitting down for an exclusive conversation with us today. Before we begin, I would like to present our head table guests, who I believe are coming in just a moment. Please hold your applause until everyone has been announced. So first we have Matt Sulkin, who's Managing Director of Accenture. We have Bob Arthur, President of the Magellan Corporation. Carl Vanderwilt, retired Chairman and CEO, SunTrust Bank, and also a Director of the Executives Club of Chicago. Dan Ryan, President of the Central Region for JLL. Deb DeHaas, Vice Chairman and National Managing Partner, Center for Board Effectiveness of Deloitte. Bill Dreigert, Head of Operations for Uber Freight. Chris Shavink, President and CEO, Shure Inc. Michael Flannery, Chief Executive Officer, Duchossois Capital Management, and a Director at the Executives Club of Chicago. Wayne Bush, President, Financial Services of NTT Data. David Hanflin, Partner and Head of Americas, A.T. Kearney, and Director of the Executives Club of Chicago. Dara Khosrowshahi, Chief Executive Officer, Uber. Jim Coleman, Senior Managing Director, Accenture, and a Director of the Executives Club of Chicago. Eben Kuriakos, Director of Chicago Next, part of World Business Chicago. Linda Imonti, Office Managing Principal, KPMG, and Director of the Executives Club of Chicago. And Rahul Shah, Chief Executive Officer, Catalyst Technologies. Thank you all for being here today and for your support and commitment to the Executives Club. I also want to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors. Without their support, a program of this magnitude really is not possible. So again, please hold your applause until all of our sponsors have been acknowledged. First, our Platinum Series sponsor, Accenture. Our Silver sponsor, JP Morgan Chase. Our Tech and AV sponsor, Shure. And additional thanks to our media sponsors, the Wall Street Journal and the Chicago Latino Network. Please join me in thanking these companies for their support. So for those of you who are not yet members, and perhaps this is your first time to one of our events, we welcome you to our season kickoff, and we hope to have you join the club. As you'll see, we provide unparalleled access to world-class thought leadership, industry forums, mentorship, leadership development, networking opportunities all over the course of a season. Dara is going to be a tough act to follow as our headliner, but he is in some good company. So here's a highlight of some of the other programs that we have coming up. This Thursday, we have a panel discussion on the future of the cannabis industry in Chicago. The following week, we have a fireside chat with Tom Wilson, the Chief Executive Officer of Allstate, on September 18th. Shortly after, we welcome Diane Swank, who will be moderating a panel discussion on the new USMCA trade deal. And later this fall, we have Chicago's Tech Plan, Jeff Harmoning, CEO of General Mills, Charles Schwab, Diane von Furstenberg, and many more to come. So as you can see, we have a very busy fall ahead. Please continue to check our website for upcoming events. So now I'd like to invite Jim Coleman to the stage to say a few words on behalf of Accenture, who is our Platinum Series sponsor for our Technology and Innovation Series this season. We're also excited that Bill Dreigert, who's the head of operations for Uber Freight, could also join us today. So following lunch, he will come up and say a few words before I sit down with Dara. But please welcome Jim Coleman, Managing Partner, Accenture, and Director of the Executives Club of Chicago.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Coleman. I run Accenture in Chicago, and I have been a board member of the Executives Club for the last 4 years. I'm delighted to be here today to welcome you to this first program of the Executives Club 2019-2020 season. For over 20 years, Accenture has served as co-sponsors of the Business Technology Forum at the Executives Club. The forum serves as a great place to bring together business and technology leaders to discuss trends, the growth and retention of talent in our community, and the economic development of Chicago. This year, Accenture is also sponsoring the Technology Innovation Signature Series, which brings us here today. This series has a history of bringing into speak internationally renowned leaders in the digital economy. People such as Greg Brown, Bill Gates, Brad Keywell, and many, many others. Having Dara and Bill here today from Uber represents a very unique opportunity for us, and one that is worthy of the tradition that we've set forth here at the club. It speaks volumes for the Executives Club's recognition and dedication to bringing the most prominent executives to Chicago. Since its founding, Uber has been the example of digital disruption, transforming our economy, and has helped redefine the very nature of modern transportation. The fact that we all now use Uber as a verb speaks to the profound way Uber has transformed our culture and society in a very short amount of time. The dedication Dara has shown to responsible growth at Uber, bringing the company public with an eye toward the well-being of riders and employees, matches closely with our mission at Accenture to use technology to improve the way the world lives and works. In just a few minutes, we'll hear from Dara, Bill, and Margaret on how Uber is continuing to innovate, and we'll see how Uber will grow here in Chicago. I'd like to make a comment about Chicago. It's a tremendous time to be here and to be in this business community here in our city. The digital economy in our city is expanding and driving growth in many ways. Chicago is proving to have the right mix of current and future talent, engaging community college and university networks, business and civic leadership, technical and transportation infrastructure, as well as that get-it-done approach that I believe will fuel our digital economy for many years to come. When it comes to the digital economy, we will not be the second city. The Uber announcement this morning with Mayor Lightfoot is a great example of that. With that, on behalf of Accenture, as well as the Executives Club of Chicago, thank you for being here today. We want to extend again a warm welcome to our friends from Uber and their whole team. Please enjoy your lunch. Bill will be up in a few moments to introduce Dara. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hello. Hello, everybody. If you're looking at your program, I am not Leo Ron, so I have the pleasure to introduce Dara today. So my name is Bill Driegert. I'm the head of operations for Uber Freight. I'm extremely excited to be here today in Chicago with the Executive Club of Chicago. I actually lived in Chicago for 10 years. Both my children were born here. I got my MBA at Booth. I got married in Chicago. And I learned about logistics here in Chicago. So it's very close to my heart. And when we started Uber Freight, we knew very quickly that we had to be in Chicago. Chicago is the center of logistics in the US, and we knew that had to be part of the Uber Freight story as well. So quickly, I want to thank our host. I want to thank the Executive Club of Chicago, part of the city's business community. I also want to thank our sponsors. So thank you to Accenture. Thank you to Jim. Appreciate you having us and making this happen. And of course, we're here today because, as many of you know, we're celebrating the opening of a new office in Chicago. Uber Freight will be investing over $200 million annually in the region, and investments in headcount, real estate, and other expenses. The new office here will serve as the center, as the headquarters for Uber Freight, and one of our primary engineering hubs. Chicago is the heart of America's transportation and logistics industry and has long been one of Uber's business centers. There's no better place to open our dedicated headquarters than here in Chicago. So I'm pleased to introduce Dara Khosrowshahi, CEO of Uber, where he manages our fast-growing business across 63 countries around the world and leads our global team of over 22,000 employees. Dara comes to us from Expedia, where he was CEO. He grew Expedia into one of the world's largest online travel companies. He's a seasoned executive with a background in both engineering and finance. We are thrilled to have him at the helm of Uber today and here with us in Chicago today to celebrate our new office. So please join me in welcoming Dara to the stage.
Thank you. I think you're going to be here. Okay. Hi, Dara.
Hello. Great to be here.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for eating your lunch so quickly, so we could just get right to it.
Absolutely.
I don't know how many chicken salads you've had. I'm sure you're okay.
It's a rarity nowadays.
Yeah. So we are really thrilled to have you here today to announce Uber's significant expansion and its presence here beginning next year. Our two teams have been talking a lot, bringing us to the stage here together. I know that part of why you wanted to sit down with the Chicago business community here today is so that not only they can understand Uber and its investment in the region, but also you as its leader and get to know you a little bit better. That's usually what the Executives Club does with the CEOs that we bring in. So let's start by letting people get to know you a little bit more. So I'm going to start with a question. So you've had a fascinating life story that not everyone may know, but is particularly relatable in today's climate. So you grew up in Iran.
Yes.
You had, by many definitions, a privileged life at the time. And then at age 9, during the revolution, your family left everything behind and fled to France, thinking they would return. But you didn't return. You came to New York.
Still on vacation in France and stuff.
Yeah. Lived with an uncle. And then your father was not able to re-enter the US for 6 years, basically your entire adolescence, which we all know is a crucially, formative time. So how did that whole set of experiences influence not only your worldview, but you as a corporate leader? Softball question.
Wow, deep question to start things off with. So yes, and I grew up in Iran, and the circumstances under which we came to the States were pretty unfortunate in that the Iranian Revolution had happened, and anyone who was well off was no longer welcome. My family amongst them, so we had to come to the U.S. and live with my uncle, and move from a mansion to a 3-bedroom apartment in Tarrytown, New York. I think for me the experience taught me a couple of things. One is that I am profoundly thankful, and now even more so, to have come to the U.S. during a time in which immigrants were welcome. And if you think about the context back then, this was during a period when the revolution was happening, when in Iran people were burning flags. When at one point during my when I was 10 years old, there was the embassy hostage situation where Americans were being taken for hostage. You can imagine a foreigner, but especially an Iranian, coming to the States will be a little bit worried about how he or she would be treated. And I do have to admit, we did have some games of hostage crisis when I was in school. Guess who the hostage was? Me. It's okay. This society, this is an incredibly welcoming society. For a family to be able to lose everything, and we lost everything, to come here and to be able to rebuild your life is something that is truly extraordinary. And I think the extraordinary is happening like all the time around us here in the States, and we take it for granted, but I don't.
Yeah.
Because I've been privileged to, and I've been incredibly lucky to come here and be able to rebuild. So for us, that thankfulness has been a huge part of being an American citizen, and it has translated into kind of one of the pieces of my identity as a CEO of the company. With business nowadays. CEOs are expected now to take stances on social factors and not just be about the business. And for me, being an immigrant has made it very easy to take a stand as it relates to immigration and how important immigrants are to our society and how important it is for society to continue to be open to immigrations, and understanding that while everything isn't uniformly good or bad, immigration as a force here, we are a nation of immigrants, and I am hoping that we as a country, despite the recent bumps, will continue to be welcoming to immigrants coming in.
Yep. And you have been outspoken on certain issues.
Yeah,
such
absolutely.
as the travel ban, also the response to Charlottesville. And you already mentioned, and I was going to bring up, that we are in an interesting time where CEOs are being expected to speak out on issues that are important. And so how do you personally balance when and where you're going to speak out, trying to bridge that role between private citizen, but then also CEO of a public company? And how do you decide when you're going to speak out and maybe let that one go?
Yeah, I think that the divide between private and public now is becoming increasingly blurred.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing, but I think it's also a good thing to some extent. There is no such thing as having kind of this private world as to how things work and the public world or an image that's different. Those two are coming together. So I think it's challenging us as companies and as business leaders to step forward in a more transparent and authentic way. And I ultimately think sometimes that the bringing together of the public and the private can be painful and difficult, especially when there's a mismatch, because the truth always comes out. But I do think that our leaders being more transparent, authentic, and our companies becoming more transparent, authentic, ultimately is absolutely going to be a good thing going forward. As it relates to taking stances, personal stances, one way or the other, from my position, it's a little strange because just because I'm successful in business, there's this assumption that I know more than someone else as it relates to personal matters, right? I don't think business qualification makes me more, qualified to talk about one interest being better than the other or how you shape your lives. But somehow human beings kind of associate it, well, this is a person who's figured it out, so tell me what your formula is. So I am pretty hesitant of using my platform because it's actually Uber's platform. It's not my platform. And what we look for and what I look for is what are the areas where my personal interests align with Uber's interest? And when we get that commonality, that's when I'll step forward and speak. And for example, as it relates to immigration, it's something that I take that's deeply personal because I was an immigrant. And I think I've been a success story as it relates to immigration. I think that immigration is important for our country, our economy. I think it's a positive force. And 50+% of our driver partners at Uber are immigrants. And as a result, we as a company are a vehicle for immigrants to come to this nation, to start earning, use that sometimes. Sometimes it may be a full-time job, sometimes it may be a bridge to something else. You look at Chicago, for example, residents of Chicago's drivers in Chicago have earned since 2017 over $1 billion in earnings driving on Uber. And the majority of those drivers don't come from the center of town, they come from the west side or the south side. And so we as a company are an engine for opportunity that tends to expand the opportunity beyond the city centers. And immigrants are a very important force in that, and immigration is something that I feel strongly for. So when the two come together is usually when I'll talk. It's certainly in the company's interest, but then it's something that is authentic as well because it's something that I care about.
Yep. So you do appear to be someone who has figured it out, for your metaphor.
Just wait until tonight, it all breaks down.
Okay. So. But your career has been impressive.
It's been
started out as an analyst.
Yeah.
Moved up very quickly, then through IAC to become CEO of Expedia at the ripe age of 36.
Long time ago.
Yeah. During your tenure, you did several acquisitions, expanded to 60 countries, doubled earnings. You've done a lot. So a lot of what we do here at the Executives Club is leadership development. We help train Chicago's current and emerging business leaders. So if you can share with the folks in the room, what was the moment at which you knew I'm going to be a leader?
I don't think it was necessary. There wasn't a specific moment. And I don't think it was necessarily something that I was looking for. If there's one, I give all kinds of advice, but if there's one piece of advice that I would give folks is actually, I find people making mistakes in their career because they are trying to plan their career too specifically. And this world of ours, the volatility in the world and the change that we see, I didn't plan to become Uber CEO. So I actually think that, over and over I see young people who are like, I want to make a certain amount of money by this age, or I want to be of a certain title by Y age. And for me, actually, being open to opportunity and not planning too much. And I look for three things whenever I'm thinking about my next opportunity. One is I think about, are there people around who I respect or can I learn from? And do I like them? By the way, liking them counts for a lot, right? So one, is there a group that I want to be a part of, learn from, and like? Second is, can I make a difference in this particular role? And then the third is, wherever I'm going, is it making a difference in the world, right? And if those three, if I can check the boxes on the three, then I'm like, yep, I'm going to go there. Yep. And so that view of the world, which is I'm going to keep my options open, and I'm going to look for opportunity and find people who I really, really like, has led one way or the other to where I am now. It has never been, I want to get in this X area or I want to be leader one way or the other. And my view on leadership is that you can have leaders all over the world. And I think people sometimes intermix leadership from management. Right? So management is management is a skill. To some extent, it's a contract, right? If you're a manager, your position is defined by your place in the organizational chart. Right? And being a manager, it's a very important skill. You have to know how to communicate. You've got to be able to give reviews, et cetera. You've got to align the team, et cetera. It's very, very important. But whereas management is about the head, leadership's about the heart. And I believe that you can lead from anywhere, right? I mean, you can have an analyst who goes above and beyond, who works his or her ass off for 20 hours, on a project because he or she really, really cares about it. I consider that leadership, right? And so from that standpoint, my father taught me, lead by example, don't, kind of wave your hands, et cetera. And I've always taken that position in life, which is, I'm always going to not only get my job done, but get it done better than expected. I'm not going to do what's asked, but I'm going to understand why the person's asking it, and I'm going to answer that question. And that kind of attitude of leading by example has put me in a position now where I'm actually leading, and kind of the combination of being a leader and a manager in this kind of a job have to come together. And by the way, both are super important. But for me, management is about the head, leadership is about the heart, and when the head and the heart come together, that's when beautiful things happen.
So you are, and you need to be, a very different kind of CEO than the founder was and needed to be at the time. And so taking over from a founder to usher a company into its next chapter has its whole set of challenges, things that are unique. So what was the most surprising part of that for you, coming into a situation where you were taking over from a founder?
That's interesting. So I took over for Travis Kalanick, who was one of the founders of Uber and had run the company for 8 years, extraordinarily well for most of those 8 years. But obviously towards the end, kind of the growth at all costs mentality that had served Uber stopped serving Uber, and to some extent went too far. And when I came to the company, there was a real challenge for me, which was to signify and be very clear, first internally, because that's the most important, first internally, and then externally, that we have to change. As a company, we have to change how we go forward, and it cannot be growth at all costs, but it has to be growth in the right way, and that means growth for us, but growth for our drivers, our riders, our communities, the cities in which we're operating, the governments whose streets we're using. And so I did have to come into the company and be pretty forceful, and one of the first actions that we took as a team was to say we have to change the values of this company, kind of the culture of the company, because the culture that Travis had built was pretty extraordinary. And by the way, mostly for a while, pretty extraordinarily good for a while, but then it led to some of the values being weaponized in the wrong way. So what we did was we actually went out to the company and we crowdsourced our values as a company. We said, what kind of a company do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What do you want Uber, the Uber brand to be associated with? And what's super interesting about what came out, and myself and the leadership team, we kind of took all of the data that came back from our employees and we edited it into a new set of cultural norms. And what was super interesting about those norms were that they turned out just as I hoped, in that they were a continuity of the old and the new. And so, for example, we have a cultural norm that we talk about all the time, and we call them norms because instead of being kind of words on walls, these are wonderful words, I don't want to insult them, they refer to behaviors. You know, norms are the behaviors that are expected in a company. For us, kind of the top one is we do the right thing, period. And there's a lot of discussion, for example, well, what does that mean, do the right thing? And we just said, period. We're going to trust you as employees, Uber employees. We can't be directive of exactly what doing the right thing means in every circumstance, but you, if you're an Uber employee, you carry the weight of representing the company and doing the right thing, considering all the stakeholders in the company. So that was like new, but then at the same time, there were old values. We make big, bold bets, which is an older value that came and carried over to the new. So what I'm hoping to shape was a combination of new and old. It is still, for me, a difficult balance in being clear that the new Uber is different, but at the same time acknowledging all of the good that came with Travis, his leadership, and what was built before I came here.
Because by their very nature, a high-tech growth company is going to have a different culture than more traditional.
Yeah.
It has to, you know, and all the good and the bad that comes along with it. So having been at a few of those companies and watching them, you know, as an observer, what would you say are maybe the 2 to 3 pillars of a high-tech growth company that would be a strong culture that helps them achieve their goals, and what should their management be thinking about to help them actually?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many, but I think first for us is the ability and daring to make mistakes. And this actually, it goes to the original story for me. You know, coming from a life where my family lost everything. While we lost everything monetarily, you come to the realization that you can lose everything, but if you've got each other, you're going to be fine. So for me, that has led to an understanding that with risk comes reward. With risk comes failure, but reward. And so for us as a company now, one of the real pushes that I have as a company and technology companies have to have is you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to make mistakes in order to succeed. And you know, if you're going to fail, my ask is at least fail fast. You know, so for you to like plan everything out and create these big business plans and take 7 months to launch, it's like, oh my God, like, you know, you wasted 7 months as opposed to saying, this seems like a good idea. Let's get a team together. We, for example, we're making a bet on high capacity vehicles, right? A very important, one of the issues, for example, that's talked about in Chicago and every big city is congestion, right? And if we keep growing the way that we grow, we're going to have more cars on the road. If there are more cars on the road, I suspect that more people are going to be unhappy about congestion. So we decided that we're going to make a bet in essentially high capacity vehicles, or vehicles that can take 10 to 15 people, fit them into the car. The business, we didn't know how the business model was going to work. But we knew that we have to work on this problem because it's going to continue to be a problem going forward. So a team got together. It was a business team, it was a product team, it was a technology team. And in about 7 weeks, we launched a high-capacity product on the streets of Cairo. We were on the streets of Cairo with vans, driving these vans. Now, the first month was a complete disaster. Okay, I mean, the product that we had built was a total disaster, and people didn't understand it. It wasn't showing up. People were like, well, am I in a bus? We called it Uber Bus. But then the routes were dynamic, the schedule was dynamic. You know, while people don't expect that out of a bus, they expect predictable routes, et cetera. We are now we were willing to make a mistake, The early input was very negative, but we had the vision and said, like, we're going to keep working on this thing, and lo and behold, we keep iterating on the thing, and it gets better and better and better. So those two factors, the combination of those two factors, being willing to make a mistake, but always having a view of preserving speed. Because if you're slow and making mistakes, you're dead.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're fast and making mistakes and moving quickly, that allows you actually to bring in more data. The mistakes allow you to get better. You've got to learn from your mistakes. But the combination of speed and an appetite for failure, for me, has been the constant factor, and one that we keep iterating on at Uber.
Yep. So as CEO of Expedia, you were able to quietly grow that company into one of the world's largest
no one cared about what I did
travel
there.
companies.
It was great.
Yeah. But now, the spotlight burns on you much brighter.
Yes.
There's been a lot of media attention to the company. We all know a book just came out last week. So how does that level of scrutiny and attention affect how you are running the company? Does it impact it at all?
Fundamentally, I don't think it doesn't affect the fundamental decisions that we make. I think that building out, so working within the Uber ecosystem, where there are drivers, couriers, truckers who are depending on you to make a living, that is a consideration that, frankly, I wasn't familiar with. Expedia was essentially a B2C business.
Right.
Our clients were hoteliers. They were professionals. Sometimes things went right. Sometimes things went wrong. If our payment system fails for our driver partners, there are some driver partners who depend on us to put dinner on their table, right? So I think that for me, it's not the public scrutiny, but what's much more important is the responsibility that we have as a company for people when they are using us to make a living or to make supplemental income. But the import of our company in these folks' lives is the far more important factor for me. That does slow us down sometimes because you have to take that consideration. That's kind of a holy consideration that we have to hold. But I think if we keep going forward on this kind of, hey, just do the right thing, keep trying to drive innovation, keep trying to drive opportunity within the transport ecosystem, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah. This is great. Thank you for sharing all that. So now let's talk about Uber in Chicago, because that's really the big announcement.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people saw the news today. I checked at 9 o'clock and it hadn't been released yet, but then someone told me around 9:45 it had been
now
released.
out.
So for people who are not addicted to your phones and it's not out, I'll let you know it's actually going on. So this morning, Uber announced the opening of a new freight headquarters in Chicago with plans to invest $200 million annually in the region through headcount, real estate development, and other expenses. Thank you. And this new office will serve as Uber Freight's first engineering hub outside of San Francisco. So this is really exciting for all of us. We're thrilled to have you here. We all knew that you took a lease in the old Main post office. That got released a couple weeks ago, but there was lots of speculation about why and what you were doing. So now we all know why and what you're doing. So what made Chicago so attractive that you wanted to make a significant investment here? And I know it's been alluded to, being such a central hub for transportation logistics, but anything else?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've been in Chicago for a while.
Yeah.
So first of all, and so I think Chicago won because we experienced Chicago, right? And you can imagine, we looked all over the US. There are many, many cities that we looked at. We kept coming back to Chicago. We've had over 1,000 employees in Chicago, both on the freight side of the business and on rides, eats, et cetera. So we're familiar with the market, first of all. Our employees here are happier. They work hard. The educational system here, actually the colleges that you have, are excellent. And technology companies like ourselves, we are desperate to find talent.
Right.
It's there. We're constantly looking for technical talent, product talent, design talent, and too many of us are looking for that talent on the coasts. And so we wanted to look, what are other significant centers of talent that also have the capability of continuing to build up talent, which is where the educational system comes in, which is so important. So for us, Chicago is a talent hub, and how our team had done in Chicago was really, really important. Freight is the headliner for us here. Freight is one of the fastest growing parts of our business. It is about using the power of digital information to essentially take this offline business online and to match shippers and truckers together in a digital way. And Chicago is a center for logistics innovation, transportation innovation as well. Mm-hmm. I think the other interesting thing about Uber is we're a tech company, but unlike other tech companies, our operating sphere is the real world, mm-hmm. right? It's not like organizing the world's information. You push a button and a car shows up, right? You push a button and a Big Mac shows up in under half an hour. Or now with freight, you put a load in and actually trucks move around, right? And the physical world is a mess, right? And the problem of using digital technology, and to some extent, we're digitizing the physical world. We want to make sure that your car shows up in 4 minutes. We want to make sure that your food shows up perfectly hot, crispy if you've got fries in under half an hour. Using technology to digitize the physical world and make the physical world, which is often unpredictable, predictable, is a super important challenge for us. And it's kind of ugly, dirty, get your hands dirty kind of work. And Chicago, like that attitude, that get it done attitude of Chicago, which is, hey, give me a really hard problem where I can get my hands dirty. Yep. That very much matched up with the Chicago attitude. And I think that you are seeing a digitization of transportation, of infrastructure, et cetera. And I think Chicago can play a very, very big part of it, and we want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And so I know we have to get through a lot quickly, so I'm
going to
try to get through all of this because we have a lot of people. No, this is great. A lot of people have questions for you.
Yeah.
So you also announced something else that not everyone may be aware of, and that's the collaboration with the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, which is going to foster workforce diversity at Uber and leverage Uber's platform to connect candidates from all parts of the city to local employers. And so as you know, this commitment to creating economic growth that's both dynamic and inclusive and helping ensure that the jobs of the future are available for every resident is something that is paramount to our current mayor's administration. So I know you're going to be meeting with her, and I know she'll be thrilled to hear about this. But why was this so important for Uber?
I think it was so important for Uber because first of all, it's the wonders of technology and the economic growth that all of our country has experienced over the past 10 years has been too restricted to a few. Mm-hmm. It's just, everyone knows it.
Yep.
And unless you actually change how you work, and unless you change your behavior, the same thing's going to happen over and over again. And what we saw with Chicago is, this is, we were here, but this is a big step forward. The new office, hiring 2,000 people, et cetera. And we said that, hey, why don't we actually, right at the beginning, it's pretty hard for companies to change established behaviors midstream. If you got your hiring processes, employment processes, et cetera, to change midstream is pretty hard. Well, this is a start here in Chicago. Like, this is going to be a big start for us to add 2,000 people to our workforce over the next 5 years. Why don't we, at the ground floor, find someone like the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership to work from right at the beginning, mm-hmm. to establish hiring processes and reach into talent pools that are truly diverse. And by the way, if those talent pools aren't deep enough, work with others to deepen those talent pools so that right at the beginning, we hopefully, and I'm hopeful, but I also expect this center for Uber to become a center that is the most diverse center, the most inclusive center. It's going to be our second largest office in the U.S. If we make it job number 0 to build in the right way and build in an inclusive way in partnership, we think we can get it done.
Yep.
And I think every company's working on it. This was just an opportunity to get in the ground floor the right way, and I'm pretty hopeful about it.
I think that's equally laudable, so I'm going to
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about profitability in this era of tech.
Yes.
As you know, our own hometown Groupon was founded in 2008, and it was not profitable even through their IPO until just last year, which was 10 years later. We also have beloved brands like Pinterest that are still not profitable. Uber was founded, I think, in 2009,
yes.
So you're hitting around your 10-year mark. What should investors expect in terms of profitability and IPOs in this era of tech? Is there a new normal that we should be coming to terms with?
I think the markets change all the time, but what you have seen with technology is that the opportunity to create value at scale with these businesses. We did last quarter, 1.6 billion trips, right? So the scale of our business is so enormous that, and combine that with the interest rates and the cost of money being so cheap, right? And it's only getting cheaper, the 10-year curve, et cetera. When you combine the size of these markets and the total addressable markets that Uber is going after, these are between riding and eating and the freight business, it's over a $10 trillion market that we're going after. With interest rates being so low, the value of a revenue dollar 10 years from now is almost equal to the value of a revenue dollar today, right, in a low interest environment. So the value for growth is so much higher now than it ever has been. And when you combine the value, interest rates being so low, and the total addressable markets for us being so high, the only thing that makes sense is for us to invest and lean forward. And so this year we're going to be investing over $3 billion in this business from a cash basis. And I truly feel like that's the right thing to do for our investors. Are the losses going to come down? Absolutely. This is going to be our peak loss year. Will Uber be profitable? I am certain it will be. But right now, the losses and the investments are because the market is so big, the opportunity is so big, and usually the first player is the one who wins the majority of the marketplace, not all of the marketplace.
So I want to close out on tech talent because there is a focused commitment here in Chicago to become a tier 1 tech city over the next 12 to 15 years. We have the P33 initiative. I know you learned a little bit about it earlier. And in fact, we have a program about it on October 4th. So I'm going to plug that here right now. But as we now consider you a part of this journey,
yes.
I'd love to get your thoughts and insights because not all companies are going to be equally, sexy or appealing for high caliber talent. We even had the CEO of Caterpillar here a few months ago and talking about the challenges that, they're actually doing incredibly cool things. They're at the forefront, but, the hot shot coders coming out of school don't really think of Caterpillar, as the place that they would want to work. And so when thinking about Chicago and Illinois and about how we're going to be transforming this, and now you're in it to win it with us. So what is Chicago and Chicago's companies and business leaders, what do you think we really need to be focused on to realize this vision of becoming a tier 1 tech city in the next 12 to 15 years?
So I think I point to two things. One is, I do think that Chicago, you've got your wind at your back. The cost of living in many of these coastal centers, along with the quality of living, is getting to the point of where there's real value to establishing of talent, both for employees and employers elsewhere. It's just getting too expensive, okay? So I think from that standpoint, Chicago has its wind in the back. I think that innovation has, where tech innovation is happening, has gone from kind of digital only, the Googles, the Facebooks of the world, to Internet of Things. But now more and more, everything in the physical world is going to be inured with technology, empowered by technology. And I think Chicago's kind of center in terms of industrial, transportation, logistics innovation positions Chicago actually to be a tech leader in an area that's going to be super hot for the next 5 to 10 years. So I think the combination of the negative of the coasts, where I see technology going for the next 5 years, I think are big advantages for Chicago. Now, I do think that one thing that Chicago absolutely needs to establish is a startup technology ecosystem. I think with Groupon and with some of the folks out there, there was some start there. But I'm hoping that with Uber being here, some of the other technology companies being here, what you want to create is an ecosystem that is that fuels itself So many of the Uber founders, Travis has gone and built another company. Garrett Camp, who's a founder, has seeded 4 or 5 different companies. Many of these employees who grow up within these technology companies, at some point they move to build other companies. And I think that whatever this group can do to sponsor and build these ecosystems that are supportive of startups, of taking risks, of 3 people, spinning out of a tech company and going and starting something new. Once you get that kind of fire and gasoline kind of picking up, then you truly get something great. So I think you're going to have wind behind your sails, but then don't let that wind go to waste. Make sure that this city invests in its startup and tech ecosystem, and if it does, the two coming together, which is corporate groups coming and then some startup goodness, that will come together to light what I think will be a wonderful, I'm not allowed to speak about Chicago fires, but wonderful ignition of the tech scene here in Chicago.
Well, thank you for getting on that train with us. We're happy to have
Absolutely.
you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy day to have lunch with us here today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
And thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Very much.